Okay, I said I wasn't going to do any more, but that was basically because I ran out of the very lowest level stuff. I'm going to leave all the good stuff, the meaty stuff, to the YouTubers out there that know what they're talking about. So this is me giving you the most basic information that I know, because I'm still learning this as well, but I'm going to dump what I currently know and try and give you guys I guess the easiest way of thinking about certain concepts to try and get your foot in the door before you start looking at really complicated stuff. So I'm kind of the casual, before you get hooked, start toying with things. Oh wow, I really enjoy this. So I mean, the appeal to flying aircraft obviously is getting it precise and perfect, but I'm not here for that. I'm here just to get you in there to get started. So since the Apache's come out as a pre-release or work in progress beta as of yesterday, I think this aircraft's going to appeal to a much broader spectrum of people and probably get a lot more people interested. So here is a green series for rotary wing, and I mean green series 1 episode. Okay, so we're in the Apache. The engine's already started, so we're just going to run through some basic concepts. Like I said though, I'm going to be learning this with you guys. So this is the just Billy basic information I've got as of now to try and impart on you, to try and, I don't know, get it sort of organized in your head how things work. Now, some of the techniques and stuff I'm going to show you probably won't apply in all situations. Like I said, YouTubers who know what they're doing, who are possibly pilots, are probably better to go to for more complex stuff. But we're just going to try and get the basics in your head so you can understand how it works. So with a chopper, we call these rotary wings because the wings themselves are spinning. So with a traditional aircraft, you're ejecting something out the back and the opposite force is pushing your aircraft forward, and the lift is generated by fixed wings. Whereas with a helicopter, obviously, this fan that we've got above our head is what's generating the lift. Now, when we're in this seated position, the fans themselves are kind of flat. Now, if you've ever stuck your hand out the window in a moving car, which I don't recommend because you're going to lose your arm, but in some situations it's safe to put your hand out the window. Now, if you hold your hand horizontal to the ground, your hand's not going to want to move. You don't feel any force on it. But if you tilt your hand, so the attitude of your hand, your palm is kind of facing forward, it's going to try and lift your hand. And the converse, if your palm is facing rearward, so your fingers are facing forward ever so slightly, it's going to try and force your hand down. That's what this little thing here, the collective, does. So when the collective goes up, see that little thing move? As that goes up, the pitch on the rotors change, and that's what produces your lift. Now, the Apache itself has 2 engines, so we've got 2 of these sticks here, see I can just move them ever so slightly, and that's the throttle. Now, because I'm not a helicopter guy, I can't, confirm this, but as far as I know, we leave the throttle just all the way up. See how it's got that fly position? I'm assuming that fly is there because that means that once the throttle's all the way up, you leave it there. The only time you need to turn that down is in possible mechanical situations or to switch the rotors off. Now, this thing that we've got in front of our eye is a monocle, and that's really just used for targeting and that kind of thing. You won't find it in the other helicopters in DCS. You might, I'm not sure about the KH50, I think it's called, KH60, I'm not sure, because I haven't actually got that one. That's a really old module that I just haven't got around to getting. So with the throttle all the way up, you can increase the collective, and what that'll do is that will slowly start to lift the chopper. Now see how we're rotating? Now if you've ever watched the movie Black Hawk Down, do you remember that scene where the tail rotor gets hit with a rocket and the tail rotor stops working? Well, that's what the tail rotor does, is it counteracts the torque of the main rotor. So when the main rotor is spinning, the opposite energy for that is trying to spin your helicopter to the right. So when Super 6-4 or whatever goes down in Black Hawk Down, the reason being is there is no other force being applied to the body of the helicopter to keep it straight. So when you're taking off, you need to apply, see those pedals there? You need to apply left rudder. Now it's called rudder in an aircraft. I think in this it's anti-torque or torque pedals or something like that. So I'm just going to take the park brake off because this chopper has wheels, and I think I've unlocked the tail wheel. So what we're going to do is, as we slowly increase the collective, I'm going to apply left rudder and just kind of feel it out, or left torque or anti-torque. Just kind of feel out where it's going. Now there's plenty of good, definitely plenty of really good videos by Wags, the DCS. I'm not sure what he is, PR guy. I don't know what his title is. I mean, I don't want to offend the guy because, you know, we all love him. Wags, we call him Daddy Wags. He explains the symbology. Now, what symbology is, all these markings and numbers and stuff, that's the symbology of the HUD there. So he explains those really well. But basically, that line that you see that's just, you know, moving around the screen is pretty much the travel, you know, where your aircraft is traveling. That number to the left is our speed. And on the right is an altitude tape, so it says we're at about 14 feet at the moment. That circle is Wags described it as which way the collective is pitched. So with that circle to the left, now it's at the right because my hovering is truly rubbish at the moment. That means that the cyclic at the top is facing that way. It's kind of tilted in that direction, meaning that that's where we're going to travel. So if I kind of leave that as is, see how we're floating to the right. Now we'll be floating forward. Now we'll be floating a little bit to the left. And then we'll start floating backwards. And this is me just holding the stick in one position. So as you can see, the cyclic is just kind of, you know, spinning around. Now we've kind of moved in this direction, so we're going to slide left. So that takes a little while to get used to, you know, looking at all that symbology and understanding what it means. So what we're going to do, we're just going to try and pop it down. Probably best to pop it down facing the other direction. So I'm just taking my feet off the rudder or torque pedals just to get that thing's natural rotation to spin it around. Now its natural rotation is obviously going to be the fastest rotation because you're letting the torque of the engine take over the yaw of your helicopter. So fighting against that, it's going to take more force, so naturally it's going to spin in its natural direction a lot easier and a lot faster. So, you know, those turns to your right are going to be more they're going to be sharper, more effective, that kind of thing. So that just takes a bit of practice of, I mean, obviously you have to be an ambi turner. You have to be able to turn left and right, but in certain situations, if you can just let it go, let it go. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is talk about trim. Now, in the Huey helicopter that we have in DCS, there's a trim button you can press, and you move your stick to where you want the trim to be. Now, generally it's back and to the left, so when you're taking off, it's more smooth and you have less of a fight with it. Now, with the Apache, I'm not sure about that, and the trim buttons, I'm still working out how that feels for me. But you do need trim. So pressing a particular trim button, because you can trim the attitude of the helicopter, you can trim the altitude, you can do all kinds of weird things with the trim system in the Apache. It's very complex. But trimming where the stick is to make hovering a little bit easier, as far as I understand, I do believe it's a trim up button, whatever trim it is. So we'll just have a quick look. Actually, we won't worry about the controls at the moment. We're just going to worry about how this thing works. So now we've covered the force of the spinning of the helicopter, basically how it generates lift. What we'll discuss now is how it flies. So there's different ways of taking off. Generally with the Apache, as far as I'm aware, they do like a taxiing on the ground to get to a particular spot and then take off, and that particular spot being a runway. Whereas I'm not going to worry about that. We'll worry about procedures and how to do things properly once you understand how this thing works. So we're just going to take off from one spot, which is a valid method of taking off, and then we'll discuss how this thing works. So applying left torque and just increasing the collective slowly. Now in this helicopter it's good because you can actually see the force. See that little arrow on the right side on the little caret on the altitude tape there? That's kind of showing you where your force is. So we should stay level now, since that caret is, pretty much center of that tape. So there was a little less force there, bringing us down. There's a little more force there, lifting us up, increasing altitude. Excuse me. Now we're decreasing altitude, increasing altitude. So you do have to kind of play with the collective a little bit to get this thing to stay where it is. Now, we're kind of hovering at the moment, although we are moving at about, 15. I do believe this is in nautical miles, so knots, so 14 knots. But what we're going to do now is we're going to tilt the nose forward, or push the collective forward, which you'll see that circle go forward of this little crosshair that we've got in front of us. So let me just get a little bit more altitude before we do this, just a little bit more. So we're at 90 feet barometric, 100 feet barometric. Now if you want to know more about barometric and radar and all that kind of stuff, my other coloured series will show you what that is. So we're going to push the collective forward, or cyclic forward, whichever one. I could be confusing the two because, like I said, we're learning together. And I'm going to ease up on the rudder. So now I'm not applying any rudder, and we're in forward motion at the moment. Now, depending on the aircraft, I'm not sure about the Apache, but there is a specific speed of which you transfer from a hover mode, where the lift is mainly generated by the down air generated by your blades, to the blades working like a wing as well, because you've got forward motion. That's a different aerodynamic kind of flight, and it flies a lot more like an aircraft. So if we were to tilt that way, all it is a tilt. You know, that downwash, as well as the way the wing in air quotes works, it turns you to the left, so you're in like a normal aircraft turn. So if we look at the carrot as well on the right side, the more nose down, the less altitude we gain, and that energy is transferred into speed. So on the left side you'll see the speed go up. So now we're at 112, 113 knots, 114 knots. Now if I ease up on pushing that stick forward, you'll see that will climb, but we'll lose speed. 114, 113, 112. So what we can do to correct that, if we wanted to slow down, is to reduce the collective. So we can reduce the collective gently. So we need to keep an eye on that, and also raise up the cyclic. So now we're, below 100. We're staying, we're still climbing a little, but we're around 830 feet, 79, and we just keep an eye on that as it gets slower and slower, and we just adjust the collective. One thing with rotary aircraft is there's a lot more going on. You have to be aware of a lot of things. Now it seems like the hover is starting to kick in a little bit, because I've got no force on any of the torque pedals, but you'll notice as soon as we hit that hover speed, and we've transitioned back into a hover, we're starting to get more of a yaw moment in our flying. Now you want to be careful here. You don't actually want to, there we go. So it's around about 33, 32. So we're definitely, see, I've got no force now on the rudder pedals, and we're just in a free spin, which means that we've hit hover mode. So I'm just going to apply anti-torque, and just going to try and neaten that up a little bit. Now the reason why I said you only want to climb when you're slowing down rather than descending while you're slowing down is the air that comes through, that's generated by the fans up here at the top, is really choppy, and you can't actually bite it with the blades. So if we go into a hover at this height, so what we'll do, I'll reduce our altitude after I slow down a little bit. So I'm just going to try and slow down. See, our altitude's reducing. We're going to hit what's called a vortex ring, which our blades are going to stay inside our wash, which means they're not going to bite. So we're just going to drop out of the sky like a rock, if I can hit it. I'm just going to try and reduce that. I don't think we're going to hit it because I've still got too much forward movement. So, but we do have a little bit of a cushion when we get closer to the ground, which is ground effect, because you're going to get more force out of the wind generated by the rotors pushing on the ground. So there's a little bit of a cushion at the bottom, but if you get caught in that vortex ring state, your rotors aren't going to work. All you're going to do is just, hit choppy air even harder, and it does nothing. If anything, it just stirs up more wind that turns into a vortex, essentially. That's the reason why it's called a vortex ring state. So around the edges, the very edge of the blades, it's pushing the air down, but the air's just getting sucked around back into the top of the rotors again, and it's not generating any lift, and you just end up dropping out of the sky. But the main thing that you need to take away from this video or this lesson is basically when we apply more collective, we get more force out of the blades, and that's what will either generate lift or forward movement. Then you've got that transition when we go from a hover to forward flight. And that rudder, basically, it's a lot easier to see in the Huey helicopter, because you can actually see like your cockpit in front of you shake, so you know to start easing up on your rudder pedals, so you can, end up in a smooth transition without, twisting your helicopter left and right in uncomfortable ways. Now also there's that little ball there that you can see. You're supposed to fly with that ball in the middle there for of those two lines there for a comfortable flight. So I'm just trying to adjust my rudder, because that's one thing when it comes to flight simulators, because there's no analog. You can get so much fine tuning, especially out of the expensive hardware, but you can't get perfect. Nothing beats the real thing, because you just can't. A millimeter movement on a real aircraft has so much more resolution than millimeter movement on a joystick or a throttle. So you buy the good stuff, the good equipment, so you can get higher resolution, you can get higher sensitivity. However, it's not going to be perfect. My rudder pedals, if I can remember how to bring up that, there we go. So as you can see, my rudder pedals, if I slowly move them, see how they jump? There's no in between, Sometimes there is. I mean, if I was to oil these up, I could make it a little bit better, but you just can't get it perfect. Okay, so apart from the transition thing and the downwash from the rotors, the generating lift, to fly this thing, mostly just to get used to it before you start, getting into the actual nitty-gritties and learning how to do it properly, is remember, keep your eye on the collective and your nose position, your cyclic position, to try and keep at a particular speed. So if you move the collective or stick up, less speed, more climb. And to adjust for that, if that's what you want, you need to adjust the collective, as I'm doing now, and vice versa. Any adjustment made to one affects the other, and that's basically it, really. That's the trick to a helicopter, from the very Billy basic levels of entry. Now, you would notice obviously the same thing in fixed wing aircraft. Your speed does affect the lift produced. However, it is very accentuated in a helicopter because of the way that it flies. So the tiniest little millimeter touch on this actually makes a huge difference. So you can adjust and go, speed doesn't matter, but altitude matters, so nose down more. Or I need to gain more height, but I'm going too fast, so I'll ease up on the stick. See, it's very subtle, and you can have massive changes. Or I want to travel at this speed and this altitude, so you just kind of match it out. You just got to kind of work with it. And this is what makes the helicopters probably one of the most fun types of modules that you can get. It's a whole nother way of flying. It requires so much concentration, and once you get that down pat, then it's time to start attacking things. But there's also many different methods that you can play with that aren't professional. Say for instance you want to land, you can just drop that collective, nose down. Now when things get more realistic, we'll probably be generating too much torque on the rotors and things will break, because at this stage this is a work in progress. It's like a pre-release, so not all of the functions are in. but you can still kind of play around with things that you're not supposed to, obviously, and that's one of the joys of flight simulators, is you can stress the airframe. And it doesn't really matter. You can pull 15 Gs and no one bats an eyelid, although we still make fun of our fake crew who are going to have to, deal with fixing your virtual aircraft afterwards. But you can play around with getting low to the ground, trying to land in a more up and down, or forward traveling. Just get a feel for you can also get a feel for pulling really tight turns. So I'm just gonna ruin my my talk and everything by just slamming that up, but you can practice with moving fast, maybe not putting the nose in the dirt, but pulling huge tight left turns like Tokyo Drift. So we'll do a bit of that here, doing something like this, just swinging it all the way around and watching the altitude changes, seeing how it really throws you off a bit depending on if you've got rudder on there, finding out what it does. It might slow you down. I know in the Huey, I started to get decent enough that I could come in real fast and then just feel that cushion. You can actually feel the cushion of the ground effect and just go into a hover rather quickly. This one I'm still kind of working out. Definitely a excellent helicopter for learning in. It's not actually as complex as it looks, to be honest. Yeah, there's a lot of buttons, but for me, I learnt the A10. I was a big fan of the A10 with lots of buttons and stuff, and this doesn't seem as complex as the A10, to be honest. The most complex part of it, and as you can see, we've gone into the hover mode because I've had to apply left rudder. So that's something you just got to be aware of. When you start feeling that yaw happen, then you're in ground effect. Yeah, so it's not as complex. Lots of buttons, lots of fun. And the coolest thing is, actually I'm going to show you because I'm piloting this. What we're going to do is we're going to arm this. Now all of these combat aircraft have a safety, and we've just switched the safety off. Now this helicopter also has a trigger guard, which I'm just going to press the button to release the trigger guard. Now the gun, I've pressed the button to, as you can see down the bottom, you can go like direction norm or rocket or whatever, but I'm selecting gun. Now if I want to shoot over here, I'm just going to pull the trigger because everything's off safe. It shoots where you're looking. How fun is that? Can you imagine flying through, urban areas once you get good at this, and you see troops or tanks or whatever, and doing that? It's just, come on, how can you not like that? So if there's any more I guess complex things that I can kind of break down into a learnable, like complex skills I can kind of break down into a learnable thing, because I know it depends what it is. It might seem complex and you might say to yourself, I don't understand how this is working. It's not, it's just not working for me. But no one's actually, as far as I've seen, I've watched a few video tutorials. Now I'm not saying I'm the only one doing it, but try and break down that skill into something a bit more understandable, which is the translation of the lift. Just getting the feel of it. Nose down means altitude down but more speed. So you have to keep your hand on the collective, that kind of thing. And that's really the main wall for getting in. If I can think of anything else that might help you break that wall, I'll make another video. But until then, I think this is probably going to be the most useful for the people who want to get into this, you know, because the appeal of the Apache is, well, it speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? To be honest. They've made games about attack helicopters since the Super Nintendo because they're cool. Yeah, I'm expecting a lot more people to get more interested in DCS since high fidelity flight sims have been around for a really long time, and this one is just getting better and better. Like, these aircraft are just, here we go, vortex ring state finally. No, it's not. Okay, all good. We'll just gently land then. But as you can see, I didn't touch the collective, but that's the ground effect, just pushing the altitude up, because we're in a nice little cushiony air bubble generated by the rotors there. And like I said, my terminologies aren't going to be, you know, like dirt is not flat. You know, if you land on a runway in this, it's a lot smoother, unless you're taking off from Tonopah. Good luck in the A10, because that thing's awful. Yeah, I forgot what I was saying. It was something important. Too bad. I'm sorry. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.